words that come to mind about like describing what it feels like to be part of being human in STEM, that first semester especially, validated, important, and included.
Transformative.
Growth.
Empowered.
It is, it's empowering.
Transformative.
Painful.
Healing.
When we're motivating, inspiring, and challenging.
I have been a human all my life. Yeah, the initiative really started because I was sitting here in my office with these students as the Amherst Uprising was happening, and I was kind of recounting for them my own story in STEM and talking about these privileges and then some of the challenges, and I had this whole elaborate analogy of a reaction coordinate and a action energy barrier, activation energy barrier, and how, you know, some of us, different things are catalysts and they lower the barrier for some of us, but we all have to get to the same point. And so I had this really excellent nerdy analogy going that I was really psyched about. And it really was one student, Gabby Mayer, who was in a class with me at the time, who said, you know, we really should do some kind of special topics where we can really delve into this and we can combine these great stories and look at the literature.
I had a lot of hope and faith that it would be something bigger, but I never expected it to be as big as it is now.
It's like sort of as if like this class was like therapy. Like I learned how to take all of my anger and turn it into something positive.
I guess being human in STEM is just, you know, really just using like an intersectional approach to understanding, you know, how humans interact with their environment, and how STEM is not STEM, while it is a very particular environment, is not separate from other environments and other ways of understanding things.
The people that do the science that leads to our understanding of the field comes from humans, and so their life stories, what makes them who they are, impacts the way they perform research. And to think that students that are learning at this stage are missing out on some of that is kind of a big deal.
The one thing I love about this class is being able to explore the ways that someone's identity can impact their experience in STEM, both negatively and positively, and learning the ways in which diversity improves people's STEM experience, and the ways in which we can make it a more inclusive space for all identities.
I think being human in STEM as an initiative has been an opportunity for people to share their stories across a broad spectrum of experiences. And I think it's through hearing each other's stories that we really come to understand the complexity of experience when we've had only our one singular experience.
So the uprising was just this, well, first of all, it's so hard to describe what it was and how it was.
I think Amherst Uprising did a very good job in exposing the problems that I think Amherst already knew existed.
Up until then, I would have to say I was very naive about how different students were, because I thought everybody here got along because it was a very diverse community. It just seemed like everybody knew each other. So it wasn't actually until Amherst Uprising that I knew that there was just such this difference.
So at Amherst Uprising, one of the points that really stand out in my mind was when there was one student he was a black student, stood up and like straight up called out professors and said like, you guys care so much about, you know, getting this homework assignment done or these exams, but you don't care about us as people. Like, you don't know what we're going through, you don't know my struggle, and you don't also know how my struggle affects how I am as a student. That resonated with me, and I know it resonated with a lot of people.
And so, and it got emotional. Like, it was hard. I remember I was in tears the entire time, and I was there for hours. That turned into days, and it was difficult. And part of those conversations also included like conversations that people had in the STEM field, and like how they felt marginalized and how they felt isolated. I was one of them. I had a horrible time in STEM. As a person of color, I don't see people like myself in the staff of STEM. All you see is like middle-aged white men.
A lot of my friends who were also pre-med, similarly to me, ended up dropping pre-med because they felt that they couldn't succeed in the field or in the Amherst educative environment.
It was really hard. It was, you know, just to see that these are our students, where we want them to succeed, we've welcomed them here, and just to see the pain and the struggle and the deep feelings that somehow in our classrooms we're not meeting their needs.
There needed to be some kind of push to be accountable, and I think that's what Amherst Uprising did. And that class is part of that accountability. So I really like the idea. I really like the idea of creating a class that was going to be continued, you know, throughout semesters, and always like continuously like challenging and also affirming, like challenging things that Amherst has yet to do, but also affirming things that Amherst has done.
There are so many benefits to being in such a like student-led and like collaborative class that I don't think any of us realized before getting into it, and like maybe didn't realize until after the class was over.
A lot of the research that we did that first semester about like what it's like being a woman in science, being black in science, and like all of these various identities, like just validated my experience, and just like being able to like name the oppression that I was feeling just like made it a lot more easy for me to deal with it.
I was just so set on the negatives because that had been such a big part of my experience initially, but you know, this class is really, it happened at a point of a lot of, you know, transformations. It was definitely very crucial to the person I am now.
It was hard and it was a lot of work, but I mean, you can't expect to achieve anything without putting in a little bit of work. So we all split off into different groups. So there was like the research group, there was like the website group. I fell into the group that did practices at other institutions with Louise, and we mostly focused on institutions that were similar to Amherst, so like NESCAC, basically.
I reached out to faculty members directly to find out what they were doing to support their minority and underrepresented students. I got a lot of input from Smith, and they had their AIMS program. They have a lot of different mentoring programs. I talked to professors at Panoma. I talked to a lot of professors who originally were at Amherst and had gone to different schools, and talked about the differences both that they saw at Amherst and at the other school.
And so I think what was refreshing about doing that work, aside from like learning how to write an email and be like present yourself in a professional manner as well as asking for something, was that hearing back from all of like the head of the departments and like how willing they were to answer our questions, and even their interest in participating and being like, can you send us like your results so that we can look into what you say? Because I think that was kind of the goal, is like to reach out and make that connection to kind of form a bigger like college community where like it shouldn't be like, oh well, Amherst we do this and that. It's more of like, at Amherst we do this and maybe it can work at your institution.
And so I think best practices was important for me because it helped me understand that not everyone learns in the same way, and I had to identify how I learned early on in college.
During the first semester in spring 2016, I was focused on interviewing students, faculty, staff, and alumni in STEM, basically just getting feedback on their experiences, what they liked and didn't like, how their identity played a role, whether that was positive or negative.
So everyone in the class did their own interviews, but we compiled all of the like audio files and summaries that people wrote, and went through them all and picked out the like, themes and patterns that we were seeing. There were quite a lot of similarities across all of them, and I think a lot of it resonated with my own story. Like it was very common to hear about people suffering from like imposter syndrome, especially like when they were first starting out in STEM, but even like seeing that continue through like their senior year. It's easy to not know other people's struggles around you and just sort of assume that everyone's doing fine while you're not. And I think like this interview project sort of like completely turned that idea on its head.
So Sandy and I worked on the same project in being in human STEM class. We were working for the resources group. And so what we were doing specifically was like gathering the historic resources here at Amherst for underprivileged students in STEM. It was really important to like uncover the things that the work that people had already done.
We also held an event at the Amherst STEM and invited students that we knew had previously been in STEM but dropped out for one reason or another.
Dr. J was very kind in letting Chelsea, Sonia, and I head that because, you know, these were our experiences.
So take, for example, the stereotype that women are bad at math. Well, it turns out that if you have girls identify as women on a math test and then take a math test, they will score worse than their male peers. But if you don't remind them of their gender, they'll score on par. And girls will perform even worse if you tell them that you're measuring the outcome of gender on a math test, taking a math test.
The students, as you've seen, the HSTEM pioneers, were just amazingly able to articulate these connections and what it meant and how important it was and where we should go from here. So that was what made me just really proud and excited to see them taking the ownership and really just being badass. Then we did our salon at the end of the year within the Center for Humanistic Inquiry, where we had different project stations and every project group had their handouts and they were ready to discuss their area, and folks just came in and were wandering around, and it was just an incredible energy of just people wanting to hear, people talking, and people just being happy to have a space where we're talking about, oh, being human in STEM, what does that mean? And oh, okay, so you're talking about identity, but you're talking about best practices, but you're talking about active learning, like all these pieces.
And I just thought it was just the most amazing initiative to see that it was student-driven, that they were working on this independently, to be thinking about these questions. I thought this was just so important.
One of the faculty members that was actually in my small group is now like my physics professor, and like being able to talk to her about like my experience and like how identity plays a part, and like hearing from her like what she thought, like just makes me feel so much more validated and like included in class, and like I feel like I have so much more of an ownership of my class, and like I feel like I actually do belong there because I know that like my professors like see me as like, they don't like, it's not like I'm there despite my identity, it's like because of my identity, like I have this experience and I can still thrive.
I feel very proud that we now have this handbook of inclusive practices that grew out of our students looking into the practices and gathering information from students on the ground at Amherst about what has helped them succeed.
Something I appreciate very much about the curricular integration piece is that it's expanding the Being Human in STEM initiative to other aspects of life at Amherst College, right? Like other parts of the student and faculty and staff experience.
So I never really put a lot of emphasis on office hours attendance. And now what I do is I actually make one office hour visit required. And by doing that, I kind of hope to lower the energy barrier for going to office hours, because you kind of have to do it. And then once you get here, you realize it's a pretty safe space, and hopefully you'll come again.
I've definitely tried to do some active learning and a mixture of active learning as well as lecture-based activities in the class and discussion. But I've also incorporated the 1-minute writes at the end of class so that students just write down briefly some ideas, their main thoughts about the class, and then their questions. And I don't know why I don't do this more often. So it was just, every time I do it, it's just amazing. I get just right away feedback. A whole bunch of students have a question about this, a whole bunch of other students have a question about this, and I can just immediately address it in the next class, which just feels really good. It feels great to get that kind of feedback right away.
I try to talk at the beginning of the semester about diversity and the importance of it in the classroom, and that my teaching style may rub some students the wrong way during certain times of the semester, or even during certain times of a lecture, but that it's intentional and that they have to be aware that there's all different kinds of learners in the classroom, and that I do things to try and reach all of them at different times, or maybe simultaneously if I'm really lucky.
It's mostly just that a lot of people are open to the idea now, that they're willing to make changes that help students feel like they can be a part of the community, and then once you feel like you're a part of the community, you're more likely to excel.
So I got to take part in a few really cool trips as part of being human in STEM. One of them was a visit to Yale, where we basically tried to persuade a group of students and professors at Yale to join our cause.
It was amazing going to Yale for the workshop for the faculty and students in STEM about best practices for inclusion. It was really cool to see that, not cool necessarily, it was interesting to see that they had the exact same problems that we did, even though we were in a tiny liberal arts college and they're like a huge university.
It was very much a learning experience because we were asked hard questions. We encountered people that were pushing against what we were doing, and that made us think very critically about what we were doing and made us think about, okay, there are people like this. There's not going to be people like who within our group that's like, yes, this is important, diversity, like being human in STEM. There's going to be people like, well, the way that it works now, it works.
I think a really rewarding moment was when we invited the Yale, so the second semester we did it, Yale was also doing their course, and they had, I think, 12 students and 4 professors, and so we invited them to come for a retreat or a summit.
And I remember I was most shocked because it was like the professor who decided to implement it in his curriculum was the one who pushed the hardest. And I think it was more like a test now that I think about it. But I think that's what's so empowering about our work. I think Yale was the first time that I realized like how much potential the work that is being done with being human in STEM has of influencing other institutions and like being part of a bigger thing. And now there's like a consortium, and now there's like different institutions that are looking into it. And I'm like, that was the first instance where I realized that the enormity of like what we're doing, like how big it was.
We presented at the Understanding Interventions conference in Texas, and we're here at this professional conference, and we're just plastering the entire hotel conference area with these flyers, with these like totally DIY, made it in the hotel lobby 20 minutes ago flyers. And at the same time, Dr. J and Professor Marinker are just like, they're leaving giant stacks of our materials on every surface, and there's nothing else around. It's just our stuff. It's just being human in STEM. And by the end, even though we only had about 10 people come to our session, everybody knew what being human in STEM was all about. And I thought, if there has ever been a moment that captures really what's at the heart of this initiative, it's this. And it was fun. Like, we had so much fun because it was just about like us being goofy and passionate and excited about what we were doing. And isn't that what everybody wants?
I mean, I want to see STEM at Amherst be more inclusive. I want it to be something that everyone who has like the interest in like completing like a STEM major can do so successfully.
What people who are kind of asking for more like inclusion or like to increase the diversity, people always worry that you're going to like compromise the excellence or like bring down the quality. When actually that quality, the way that we've defined that quality is so narrow. Science needs people from all different backgrounds. If we're gonna kind of fulfill our mission of like accurately studying the world.
I'm proud of what I did when I was working on it, and I'm proud with what is currently being done, and I hope that, you know, this work can inspire other schools, other departments that are also going through things that, you know, isn't just exclusive to Amherst.
My hope for the future of being human in STEM is that it is able to grow and expand both here at the college and beyond, while staying true to its roots. When we go to conferences and we go to meetings and we share this model with other people, I think what is exciting is that it's different. And it's different because it creates space for everybody.
One day, there will be a Being Human in STEM nationwide network that crosses from coast to coast, and we'll say it all started here, because I really do feel like it couldn't have started anywhere else, because Amherst has done such a great job at diversifying and welcoming everyone here, and we haven't learned exactly how to be welcoming to everybody in a way that feels welcoming.
I think it'll take time, and I think that makes me a bit sad, because in the time that it takes, there will be students who are affected.
There is really good work being done, and the responses have been really good, and I would just, I think, hope to see more sort of non-choir people hearing us, to like draw from the phrase preaching to the choir, just because I think a lot of the people who were initially listening to what we were doing were already in agreement with us, and so I would hope to reach more of the folks who need to be convinced.
At the end of the day, we're just human and there's nothing perfect, and that's what's beautiful about it, and that's what should be valued, is the imperfections and like the striving to become better and to grow.
We're not the same as we were 10 years ago, and we're not going to be the same in 10 years. And all of our students, regardless of what their identity on the diversity spectrum is, they're all new students who deserve to be met where they are, whoever they are. And we need to be flexible and responsive to our changing student body, all the changes that means. So that's what I hope, is that this initiative will be a place for the conversation to continue in a productive way, and that doesn't just mean, you know, doing what makes Amherst look good, or it means really listening and adapting and trying things out.